Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Trucking Risk and Insurance Podcast with your host, Chris Harris of Safety Dawg, and myself, John Farquhar of Summit Risk Solutions. Today, we want to thank Mike McCarron. He's come back to join us again. Hot topic going on. He just recently wrote an article for Today's Trucking, and we're going to get into talking about that. So let's join in with Chris and Mike. Hey, so we've got this great show going on here, as everybody knows, and we got Mike back because we're going to talk a little bit about trucking again. And you just recently wrote an article about two tiers of trucking company type operations out there. So tell us about this, because I've read it, and wow, it's so true to the word. It's not funny. So let's natter about that.
Well, thanks, John. Thanks, Chris. Have a great holiday, Chris.
Oh, I will.
I know you will have a great time. So I was asked earlier this summer by the TTSAO to chat about the industry, and really they left it pretty open to me, making sense of the trucking industry, which I thought, hey, I've been at this thing 40 years, so I could do this with my eyes closed. Mm-hmm. But as I started looking at things, I started realizing, not only how much this business has changed, how much it's continuing to change, and just how much chaos is in the market today. There's a lot of unanswered questions. There's a lot of uncertainty. And what really hit me as I tried to put this all together, really understand it for big picture, was you're really dealing with two very distinct trucking industries now in the Canadian trucking industry. You've got the legacy carriers, of which I've been a part of, all my buddies are part of, all my drinking buddies are part of, older carriers, often with family roots, fairly wealthy, a lot of real estate holdings. Kids don't want the business. Kids all have Ivy League degrees. Most of them don't want trucking, and frankly, they're selling in droves. One of the business I'm a director, Left Lane Associates, we're selling legacy carriers every month. And the thing about them is that there's very few Canadians, traditional Canadians, starting trucking companies today. It's just not happening. Yeah. I couldn't name one in 20 years. Yeah. Conversely, you've got to fill that gap. You've got a group of newcomers, whether it be newcomers to trucking, newcomers to Canada. I saw this trend starting about 15 years ago when I still owned MSM Transportation. We've all seen it grow. I don't know the exact numbers, but they were staggering how many new trucking companies started during COVID. Most of them by newcomers. Yeah. They operate very differently. Mm-hmm. They operate in different markets. And I think the thing that's most ironic to me is they actually are direct competitors, because the legacy carriers, they dominate the top 100. Their subsidies dominate. They're known to be the safest operators. And their customers are contract customers. They go direct to customers. You look at those contract customers and the threat levels. Yes, other legacy carriers are providing threats, but the biggest threats coming for legacy carriers is actually freight brokers and third parties. Yeah, big powerful ones who thrive in the newcomer market. Mm-hmm. The newcomer market almost exclusively services a third-party market, which is direct competitors to legacy carriers. And that's what I find to be very, very interesting in this.
Can you explain the threat of the load broker? I'm not quite clear on that.
Well, the load broker business has evolved into big business. These big, massive 3PLs, they have scale, they have technology, they have visibility all throughout the supply chain. They have bells and whistles. They have direct sales force, and they're big. There's I don't even know how many brokers are in Canada, but the reality is there's a lot of big, powerful brokers now. You have some. In fact, this is what's really ironic. Some of the largest brokers are actually hiding behind the brands of legacy carriers. So it's every one of them has got a massive brokerage department hiding under their brand. So. These third parties rely on newcomer carriers. And I'll give you a live example. I resigned from Left Lane. I still own the company. I'm still in the board of directors, but I resigned because, frankly, it was just too much work for me. It was all the things I didn't want, I was getting again. So I passed it over to my partner, and I started a freight brokerage business, in essence, with my son, Patrick. And you think to all the contacts that I have in trucking, I don't think we've moved one shipment with one of those carriers, a legacy carrier,
Wow.
because it's just that the rates are higher. They don't really relish freight brokers' business, and that's okay. But my point is, without newcomer carriers, it would be very hard to be. It would be impossible to be in business as a third party.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And is there a downside to using newcomer carriers?
Well, they can be interesting to deal with. That's for sure. They have some different business practices. Not as savvy. I got to be careful what I say, but because we do use it. But
Well,
it's definitely interesting. But there's no downside other than you've got to kiss. No different than when I started MSM. You have to kiss a lot of frogs to get the prince. So there's a lot of really good newcomer carriers, but there's a lot of real bad newcomer carriers too. No different than when I started MSM, 30 years ago.
well, the reason I was asking, you'd mentioned legacy carriers, and a couple of times linked to legacy carriers was safety. You'd said, safety and legacy carriers kind of in the same sentence. And when I hear you talking about the newcomer carriers, that word wasn't uttered. And of course, you're talking to two safety guys. So
Right.
I pick up on that, and I'm wondering, are the newcomer carriers struggling with safety? Or was that just my imagination when I picked, am I trying to make things up that aren't really there?
No, I don't think you're making, I don't think you're picking, I think you are picking up on something. So I don't think that you can actually get stats by who's causing the accidents, newcomer carriers, legacy carriers. But I think that I think it's pretty obvious that you can make a correlation of the fact that the highway stats are suffering. The numbers are trending in the wrong direction.
Mhm.
Number of fatalities per truck accidents, number of accidents with trucks. And I think a lot of that does point to the newcomer carriers, because I think that in a lot of cases, they're not as experienced. Often they don't have the balance sheets to fund safety programs. I think a lot of them are playing the short game because they're brand new. And frankly, I think a lot of the problem is starting with this notion of, in Ontario, for example, where a truck driver needs to be trained for 103.5 hours. Now, whoever came up with that number, I'd love to hear that.
Yes,
but I get the sense that people are just being trained long enough to get their license. And I've had several instances with large distribution centers. They actually have shunters on staff full time because a lot of the newcomer carriers or drivers can't back the truck into the yard. So I think there is a direct correlation, Chris. That's just instincts and the math. And I don't think anyone's going to say, what those numbers are, but I do recall seeing something in that Toronto Star expose from the OTA that the number of incidents with newcomer carriers is far higher when the trucks get pulled over. The number of incidents. I got to be careful because I don't have those stats.
Yeah, no, but to me it makes sense because, as you said earlier, they don't have the newcomer carriers just aren't as experienced yet. And it's like anybody. If I got a new trucking license, I might have more crashes than an experienced guy because I'm not as experienced yet. Well, the same thing for management of a trucking company. And when you're new, as you said earlier, maybe they're watching the bottom line a little tighter and just don't have the resources to do everything that the legacy carriers can do.
I agree 100%.
Yeah,
I agree.
I was going to say I can add to some of that because I go out and I see a lot of motor carriers. I do a lot of risk evaluations on behalf of different insurance companies as well as motor carriers themselves, and probably two aspects that I'm seeing quite frequently in the new entrant market is you're seeing a fella or a person who has maybe been an owner operator for a motor carrier and decided, hey, I want to start my own business, and now they're 100 trucks, and it's only taken them a few years because the opportunity's been there. The unfortunate aspect is that person only has the knowledge of an owner operator, not of the exact rules and I was a safety professional, director, whatever it be. And they realize I've got to hire some people, but they're not hiring qualified people because, well, that costs a lot more money than just hiring a body to put into that role. And then the other type of new entrant that I'm finding is somebody who has zero experience in the trucking industry and has said, wow, I could make a lot of money in the trucking industry. This is pretty cool. I'm seeing IT people come together and start trucking companies and have diddly squat for transportation experience. And it's like, cool, you can put in a really neat system to run this trucking company, but hang on, you don't even understand the risks and the exposures related to this. And they're not, again, putting out the resources that they need to hire the right people to help educate them on what they need to know to be safe, compliant, operate a good operation and whatnot. And I think what we're seeing is a lot of these guys are behind the eight ball in this approach. And the focus seems to be, I got to make money. I can't hire somebody till I make more money to pay for that person. And then it's like, hey, you know what? We're making good money. We haven't had any issues. I don't think I need to hire that person right now. We'll wait till something happens. Well, by the time something happens, now it's too late. And we should have hired somebody long ago. So because once we have one problem, we have another, and it just snowballs from there.
It would be interesting. I wonder if the insurance industry, each individual company, if they had any stats on legacy carriers versus the new carriers. And I haven't, having worked for one, I know we didn't track it that way, but that was more than 10 years ago.
I worked. Yeah, I worked for two, and I know we didn't track anything like that either. So, yeah,
Mike?
I have my doubts, but it would be a good idea.
Are you aware of anything like that?
No, I'm really not. But I think people are just starting to become aware of.
Yeah.
What I wrote about was not insightful. It was just stating the facts. But I think people are just starting to realize that they are really distinct. And to the point John was making, and I think it's important, is that two things. I think when people start out, they're worried about making payroll next week. They're not worried about about safety. You get a situation where spot market rates are down about 30 to 40% over COVID, which is why brokers are using it, because their rates are so much lower. But that's a challenge. And I think the biggest thing I found in my experience in trucking is that safety starts at the top. You could talk all you want about safety, but when the sales manager comes down and say, screw those 2 hours, go to the customer, it just breaks everything. So it really is a cultural thing. Yeah. I know when I talk to the people at XTL about this on the per hour side of things, they said they really believe that the culture part attracts the right type of driver. And I just think they're so inexperienced, a lot of these newcomer carriers. They just don't think, they really don't think about it. They do not think about it. But I must tell you, when I see someone that has trouble backing into a door, which is probably the safest and easiest thing a driver could do, a 4-year-old could do it. And I think of these drivers barreling down the Highway 401 there around Kitchener, where it's all construction, and it's wow,
yep.
And I must say it, and I have the stats in my brain, and the driving is a lot more unsafe than it was 10 years ago, and I think a lot of that is because of the untrained drivers that are out there. Because we've talked about this before, guys. You have to go to the 4-year apprentice to learn how to frame a house.
Yeah.
So you fall off the ladder, you get a concussion. Big deal. That's the worst. You break it. You break a finger. These meatheads are rolling down the highway at 80,000 pounds.
Yeah.
With about 2.5 weeks of training. Like
I have to have a certification in order to cut hair.
Hairdresser. 100%.
My teammate his wife is a hairdresser, and he goes, she's got to have more qualifications than I do to have my A license for my commercial driver's license, which is ridiculous. So, yeah. Well, and to kind of touch on what you were talking about, things have changed a lot in the last 10 years, 15 years. The congestion on the roadway is horrendous. And it's not just trucks, it's cars as well. The trucks have changed. We've the majority of automatic transmission of commercial motor vehicles is huge now, versus having something that had 10 speed, 18 speed, 13 speed, 15 speed, whatever it be. I was always a big fan of the manual transmission, just to help you better understand how to pay attention to what's going on in this vehicle. Well, now they're so easy to drive. They're like driving a Toyota anymore, just a regular car. So a lot of guys, I can drive my car, I can drive that truck. And now, unfortunately, their concentration is not there as it should be.
Well, and to that point, I think what's happened as well with this, with the OEMs struggling to, I guess, larger computer chips, but so far behind orders, trucks are staying on the road way too long now.
Yep.
Like what would have been deemed junk 10 years ago is still on the road now. You can't get equipment, and the number of trucks I see held together with bungee cords and duct tape is just appalling, and that combines to it because the new trucks are built for safer with the alarm systems and the warning, and they make it a safer truck, and the old trucks are that should have been scrapped years ago are now hauled, and a lot of them are by newcomer carriers because that's all they get equipment on.
Yep.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's easier to finance an old piece of junk than it is something brand new, and you can't get the brand new one. So,
well, and then add to, I was going to say, add to that your older equipment, so you're cutting back on getting newer equipment or maintaining it properly, which goes right into sync with I'm not training my drivers as thoroughly as I should be. I'm, as you said, Mike, 103.5 hours. I'm hiring them out of school, put them in a truck, send them down the road. So the new carriers today are not putting the commitment forth that they need to match the level of legacy carriers as to what they've done. And I know I've talked to many carriers. If you want to be as successful as those legacy carriers, you've got to invest in yourself and your people.
100%. You have to play the long game, 100%. And it's difficult because you don't want to cast broad brushes because there's a lot of good newcomer carriers that are safe operators. But I think we're talking the majority here and not trying to paint with one brush. But there's no doubt that the correlation between a more dangerous road based on the stats and the number of new carriers being started both in Canada and the United States is staggering. And everyone was trying to get onto this pandemic. We're going to need trucks, and trucks are always going to be full. And the market always corrects itself, and you're seeing that already. As I said earlier, the spot market is down, 30-35% from the heyday of the pandemic.
It's crazy. I mean, I did driver meetings over the weekend, and I always go back to the terrible tragedy of Humboldt. And, I think it's an industry sin in Canada at the moment that, what is it? I think 4 provinces now have some level of mandatory training for tractor trailer work, and the rest still have nothing. And yet 16 people lost their lives, and nobody or very few people have changed.
Yeah. Well, and unfortunately, going with that, I'm seeing a trend where new entrant carriers are trying to, I'm going to say it, they're trying to cheat the system because they're trying to operate out of those provinces that don't have those controls in place. The mandatory entry level training. They're trying to shortchange the aspect to try and save a couple more bucks.
So you're trying to shortchange a week, 2 weeks of training.
Yeah,
literally.
Yeah. Well, and they're not realizing the money that they can save. If you took into account the number of crashes you've had over the course of a year and said, well, hey, if I could save 10% of those, that's how many deductibles. Add some training in there. That'll more than pay for it. Teach the guys, big thing. We've talked about this together, the three of us, pay packages, change the pay packages, and you'll change the driver's mindset and attitude as well. You'll end up with a safer driver in the end.
The per hour model, the per mile model could be, I believe, the biggest contributor to unsafe roads because
huge.
You're just chasing miles. Find me another job like that, frontline worker, who can't get a mortgage because they can't prove what their salary is. If we have a bad winter, lose 15, 18 days of snow. It's and there's a lot of carriers doing things to downgrade the impact, but I don't understand that at all. I really don't. We've known there's been a shortage for years, and we keep trying to do the same old things and it's not working. And the problem is because of that, there's a whole other type of driver coming into it, and a lot of that I think is being created by the not paying people the money the quality people you need and the money that they deserve for that job.
Yep, exactly.
I just wrote an article today, and I refrained from putting this into the article about the employees and federal Canada paying or making employers pay 10 sick days a year, I believe it is. And CTA is not fighting it. They've asked for a postponement of it as it will negatively impact the trucking industry. Mike, you're much closer to the trucking industry than I am. Can you explain how that might impact us? Because quite honestly, John and I were having a conversation. I said, John, I thought this would be a great thing for our industry to better treat our employees. Yeah. And I was surprised that CTA came out against it.
I'm not sure the rationale, so I've got to be careful commenting on it. But certainly, anything that we can do to improve the job of truck driving is going to attract drivers. So that's the part that doesn't make sense to me. But and as I said, I've been away for a couple of weeks, and this has been a real hot button the last 3 weeks. But it doesn't make sense to me because to me, it's the working conditions on top of the pay. So not only do you not get paid when the wheels aren't rolling at no fault of your own, you also miss every birthday party, every hockey game, every ballet concert, every play your kids in. So to me, things like that, not having those compound the problem. And I don't understand the rationale behind it at all. There has to be something for them to be so strongly against it. But I would think that my initial thinking when I read that at first glance was that would be something that the newcomer carriers would struggle with, and legacy carriers wouldn't. So why wouldn't you try and differentiate yourself from them by having what really is a perk to your job?
Yeah, big time.
And I asked somebody else in our industry that I have much respect for. I asked them the same question, and they just said because the majority of the drivers, or many of them, would take advantage of those 10 sick days. And the legacy carriers are very afraid as to what it might do to the bottom line, at least initially, until they get to build it into their rates. So he had a concern, and I think it's valid. I'm not sure, but would it help our recruiting efforts and our retention efforts?
See, my take on that is, if you're worried about people taking advantage of it, they should be working for you. And that's it's casting everyone with sort of this same brush. And of course people take advantage, and of course it's going to cost you more money. But if it can help fill, how much money does it cost you to have a truck parked against a fence? Yeah. How much money does it cost you to say no to a customer because you can't get drivers? And I don't think there's just a magic bullet that's going to that's going to solve this, but it's all these little things. And they've been talking about this for years. And it's just one of those things that is hard to make sense of, because we've known this is a problem for years, and the current system's not working, and it's not going to change. And frankly, I think that's brought on a lot of this pressure from newcomer carriers, because they said, hey, we've got an opportunity to do some things here, whether it be illegal or not. I'm not certainly going to comment on that, but this whole economy, this whole other industries evolved, I think, out of their willingness to do things that maybe legacy carriers won't. Is it right or wrong? That's not for me to comment.
No, but it's unfortunate, because I know I've had the opportunity over the last 20 years to go out and evaluate a lot of motor carriers, good, bad, ugly, indifferent, whatnot, and I got to admit, it's all about the culture, the organization, the inside of what's going on. Because I have seen companies who, for years, I want to say going back 6, 7, 8 years or better, have been paying their drivers by the hour. They don't have a recruitment problem. Their biggest problem is they got to keep the guys from knocking down the door that want to come work at that company.
Amen.
And they've been paying extra overtime. Drivers go over their 60 hours, they're happy to pay the overtime. They're paying their stat holidays. They're paying them 4 weeks holidays a year, So when you build the right culture, to have something like this new federal rule of 10 sick days come in, they'd be going, cool. That's something that can help the employee, and I don't have to worry about my guys. They're not going to take advantage of it, because they don't take advantage of what we're doing now, And there's a lot of guys that don't want to take a sick day, because a lot of them are going to go, I don't want to be sick on Tuesday, because if I'm sick on Tuesday, I'm going to lose a whole week's worth of work because normally I maybe run to Iowa. I'm back twice a week. Well, now I can't get that first Iowa in. So I'm going to sit home Monday because I'm going to be sick Tuesday for a doctor's appointment. No, I don't want to do that. So there's going to be a lot of guys that are just going to go, no, I don't need the sick holiday. Thanks for having that there if I need it. Like if something seriously goes wrong, maybe I need a week, 5 days. Give me 5 days. I got to go to the hospital, got to do this, blah, 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 blah. I've got protection, but I think unfortunately it comes back to culture, and a lot of the companies are just not prepared how to deal with it because they've not set themselves up accordingly.
I don't understand this. I agree with you 100%, John. I don't understand this notion of sort of dumbing it down to lowest common denominator, this notion that all our truckers are thieves and they're going to somebody's going to rip us off 10 days. Yeah, it's going to happen. But instead of, I learned years ago, don't focus on the negative, focus on the positives, because the negatives are going to be there. And as a kid, I spent all my time trying to make people happy and that work for me. And I realized 10% of people are never going to be happy. Just get rid of them.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. I think the negatives or the negative people are the minority. Most people that you hire, they want to work for you and they want to come into work 5 days a week and do a great 100%. Job.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it's if you treat them right, train them properly, better chance they're going to stay. You don't, they're leaving. They're going somewhere else. And those that are a pain in your butt, I've seen companies where the culture is so good, their peers will drive them out. You don't have to worry about management doing it because you're going to have the peers that are going to go on, Mike, don't ruin this for us. We got a good thing here. If you don't like it, get your ass out, go find another job somewhere else, but don't ruin what we got happening. We 100%. Like working here. Yep.
We at MSM, we lost drivers all the time for nickel and dime, and then they realize they're sitting for 3 or 4 days before they get loads. Then they realize that they don't get paid until the customer pays them. Then they realize that the company trucks get first dibs on our operators, and then they realize they don't have the benefits, and then they realize that 4 cents a mile is costing them. And I would always take it back with open arms.
Yeah, we're coming up to our 30-minute mark, Mike. Legacy carriers, new carriers, what's left to be said on that?
Well, I think, I don't know if there's anything to be said. I think it's mostly a recognition that that's our reality today. I think it's a reality that's not going to change. In fact, I think we all know where the trend is going. And I think the really thing is just, the whole point of the TTSA talk was, I think that suppliers in the business have to adjust accordingly. You're dealing with two very distinct cultures. You're dealing with different philosophies about trucking, some right, some wrong on both of them. But ultimately, you've got two very distinct industries. I frankly would like to see them come together. I would really like. I would love to see groups getting together for the good of this business. I think that I worry a little bit about what's going on in Ottawa. I worry about the lobbying efforts moving forward. I worry about trucking being without a strong lobby effort, being a target of government. And I would really like it to see if the leaders of both industries, and they are two distinct industries, would come together for the good of one industry, for the good of all of us, because as we learned during the pandemic, we need a healthy trucking industry. And I don't know how healthy it is right now, frankly.
Yeah, no, agreed.
Well, and you've got that unique viewpoint because you've got the connections there to left lane, that you can see the activity that John and I don't see. And, you would know how many carriers that you're working for that are up for sale right now, or on the other side of it, of course, you're working for carriers that are purchasing other carriers that are up for sale right now. So you see what John and I and the public don't see until it hits the truck news.
Right. Well, you're seeing legacy carriers buying legacy carriers is what you're seeing. The legacy carriers will not buy newcomer carriers. They don't want the risk of driver Inc. And I understand that. I understand that. But the one thing I will say is that what's been really interesting in many of the deals that we've done with legacy carriers is they're actually driver Inc. component that the owners didn't even know about. So there's a lot of oxymorons. Everything's up in the air, but ultimately, I think that I'm hoping for the good of the industry that there's at least some clarity brought forth for a lot of these issues that have been hanging out there for years.
Exactly.
Mike McCarron. Thank you so much for joining John and I today.
Yes, thanks again, Mike. It was great.
Also, I didn't have to invite myself on this time. Although I think
no, it's a good deal. Yeah, all you got to just put your hand up.
You're always welcome on the show, my friend. If you've got something to say, please, we have a small platform for you to yell.
There you go.
Thanks, guys. Always a pleasure. Great talking to you again. Thanks.
A huge thank you to Mr. Mike McCarron, talking about the two distinct industries that we now have, legacy carriers and the newcomer carriers. Thanks, Mike. Anytime you're welcome on the show. And for all of you listening and watching, thanks for listening to the TRIP podcast. That's Trucking, Risk, and Insurance podcast with your hosts, John Farquhar and Chris Harris. Thanks. See you next week.